Hello Hastings, I'm Tom Wright and welcome to another In Uniform. In this series I speak with local veterans to hear all their stories on their time in uniform. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Steve Meyer. Steve, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
Mr. Meyer here has served over 20 years in the United States Navy and retired as a Master Chief Petty Officer, E9, the highest rank in the listed rank in the Navy. So that's quite the rank to achieve there. And so we're going to talk all about that, and Mr. Meyer here also served 2 tours in Vietnam. But first, before we get into your service, tell us a little bit about yourself and your tie to Hastings. Are you a born and raised Hastings guy?
No, I'm not. Born in southwestern Minnesota on a farm down by Laverne.
Okay.
And then after high school, I went to 1 year in college at Winona State, where met a lot of guys from Hastings, got to pal around with them. Next year I didn't go back to college. They sent me a letter that I'd learned so much the first year that I didn't need to come back, which is why I joined the Navy.
There you go.
But I did go back for a visit a couple times there, and that's where I met my my ex-wife down there, and she went around with a lot of gals from Hastings. So after I got out of the Navy the first time, and then went back in. I lived for a year down in Northfield in '72.
Okay.
But we kept driving back to Hastings for weddings and parties and stuff. And so when I decided to buy a house, so Hastings was it.
There you go. And what year was that when you officially became a resident?
73.
73. All right. Now let's talk about your ties to your Navy experience and how it all started. Take us back to that time when the story of how you enlisted and that decision to do so.
Well, this was back in the late '60s. Of course, Vietnam was going on and the draft was going hot and heavy. I went to college, not so much to have a draft deferment. I wanted to play football, but found out I wasn't going to make it there. So rather than be drafted, my dad had been in the Navy, and I'd always wanted to be in the Navy, so I enlisted down by Worthington, Minnesota.
Okay. And as soon as you enlisted, how soon after that were you shipped off?
I wasn't shipped off for about 4 months.
Okay.
4 months, so that's where I got to do a little traveling back to Winona and a little more partying, I guess.
There you go. Enjoy your free time before you lost it, huh?
Yeah. When I went in, I actually took a bus from Worthington to Omaha, which was the induction center. From there, a train, first time I'd ever been on a train. From there to Chicago. Actually got seasick for the first time in my life on that train.
Whoa. Not a good sign when you're going into the Navy.
Well, that's what I thought. I was wondering about that. Then up to Great Lakes, where I went through boot camp. And then followed on with schooling as a electrician at Great Lakes before getting sent to my first duty station.
Let's go back to your time in basic training. Tell us a little bit about that and what your first impression and on that and how that went for you.
Well, actually I was a little disappointed. I was quite into athletics and stuff, and they didn't do much physical training in the Navy,
huh?
Navy boot camp. No, a little bit of PT, but very little in there. Being from a farm, I was used to getting up early, so that was no problem.
So what did they do if they weren't focused on the physical training? What were they?
A lot of classroom training, nautical terms, who to salute, who not to salute, when to salute the flag, flag etiquette, swim tests, teach you how to if you didn't know how to swim, they try to teach you how.
Wow, so they allowed guys into the Navy that didn't know how to swim?
Well, there was a lot of people, even after they left boot camp, that didn't know how to swim.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was kind of a farce. I mean, the final test, you had to jump off of a 15-foot platform, swim 50 yards, and stay afloat for 5 minutes. Well, you jumped off the platform, you swam around to a circle, and after about a minute and a half, they just said, okay, everybody out of the pool, you all passed. In there, so.
Wow. Oh, I'm sure that made a lot of people happy then.
Well, yeah.
That were in there. All right, so from basic training up at the Great Lakes there, where'd you head off from there?
Then I stayed at Great Lakes, went through basic electricity school, and then on to more formal training for my rate, which was interior communications, gyro compasses, intercoms, telephones, TV cameras, that kind of stuff.
How did you end up getting in that line of work? Was it like a lottery thing where you just the run of the...
Not to say anything bad about recruiting, because I was in recruiting for a long time, but my recruiter kind of played games with me. When I went in for my first test for the Navy, he came out and he said, boy, you really scored high on that test. And he wanted me to take another test, which I did. He came out and he says, boy, you scored really high on that. He says, you know what, you could have your choice of aviation or nuclear power. And he did say, it's nuclear power, you got to commit for 6 years. And most of your aviation rates, if the electronics, you had to commit for 6 years. So I said, boy. He says, go home, think about it, and then give me a call. So I waited a few days and called him up and said, you know what, aviation sounds really good. Oh, he says, God, he says, you know what, I wish you'd have called about 2 hours sooner. He says, I put you in for nuclear power, but he says, don't worry about it. When you get to boot camp, you can switch over. And one of the rates in nuclear power, which I found out when I got there, that no, you can't switch out of it.
They probably gave a little chuckle when you asked them that.
Oh, yeah, he says, oh, I bet your recruiter told you that. And there.
Those recruiters.
So, as an IC, interior communications was one of the rates for nuclear power. And so you went to that A school. Then.
And how'd that go for you? Were you into it, or did it take a long time to
well,
to grow on you?
I found out about the nuclear power program. Really great program. Really great program. But it entailed 2 more years of schooling. Now, I went in the Navy just to get out of schooling. I was tired of schooling in there. I did pretty good in it, except at college, but I did real good in it, but you know, I was tired of it. And I knew I went to the A school. I knew you had to get some training, otherwise you'd be swabbing decks and painting all the time. But I didn't really want to be a nuclear power. So actually, when it comes for my final test, you had to score a certain percentile, 1 to pass the school, and 2 to stay in nuclear power. And I was just a little bit too high to drop out of nuclear power. So when I took the final test, I knew all the answers. Well, I changed a few of them and dropped them. Almost dropped too many of them because a couple I thought I had left-right was wrong.
Oh.
But I did pass the schooling. But they come back and say, "Oh boy, we don't know whether we can keep you in nuclear power or not." And so they put me in holding for a couple of weeks. Came back and said they decided not to. But so the good news is they've taken away the extra 2-year commitment. And by the way,
and you were like, "Oh darn!"
Yeah, I did that. Oh, I did. And a couple of days later, they called me back. And they said, "Well, we got your orders to the USS Enterprise, the largest warship, the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier." I says, "I'm out of the nuclear power program, but I'm going to a nuclear aircraft carrier."
Oh, funny. But
not in the nuclear field of it.
Wow, wow. So did you go celebrate then after you got that news?
I sure did.
So what happened after that? You end up tell us about that, going to the nuclear power, the aircraft carrier, and first impressions there.
Oh, now you got to remember, I'm a farm boy from southwestern Minnesota, and other than a few pleasure boats I seen on the Mississippi, I ain't never seen anything bigger than a cabin cruiser, and not many of those. I flew out from Sioux Falls to San Francisco, and then took a taxi over to Alameda, which was the carrier piers at that time. And the taxi cab driver felt sorry for me, took me right up to the pier where the Enterprise was. And I looked up at that thing, and I got just amazed. I mean, 1,200 foot, 60 flight decks, 65 foot above the water, and the superstructure goes way higher and stuff. It was the day after Thanksgiving, so I went up on board and did my permission to come aboard stuff, and they took me to my engineering spaces offices, and got someone to check me in. They showed me where my bunk was. They showed me one of the office spaces and the dining room. And then they said, okay, you're done. See you on Monday. This is not Friday. And I knew nothing about going on Liberty, didn't know anybody. So I decided, well, I'm just going to stay aboard all weekend. I went for a walk, find out what's there.
Yeah.
Proceeded to immediately get lost.
On the aircraft carrier.
On the aircraft, immediately. It's just unbelievable how many spaces, walkways there. And even though you're supposed to be able to read the numbers on the bulkheads, you're supposed to tell where you're at, what the space is for. I wasn't very good at that. 3 hours later.
Oh man.
3 hours later, I finally collared someone and had him take me back to the galley because my berthing space was right below that, and the office was just right around the corner, down below a deck.
Well, you were walking around for 3 hours.
Yeah,
trying
and
to
really,
find your way.
and never really got anywhere. Yeah.
Oh man.
In there. So I finally found someone the next day that was down in the compartments, and he kind of gave me a bird's eye tour of the ship and where to go and stuff.
Nice, nice. And so, how much time did you spend on that aircraft carrier?
The rest of my 4-year enlistment.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So by the end of that, I'm sure you got to know it pretty well. Then,
Oh,
huh?
just about every space.
Yeah.
Just about every space. Because part of the equipment we took care of was sound-powered phones and annunciators, alarms and stuff. So then they're in all the spaces.
As I mentioned, you did 2 tours in Vietnam. Tell us about that first tour and what happened.
First tour started out rather poorly. I'd only been aboard, well, this was went in Thanksgiving, and in first part of January we took off for Vietnam. Had to stop in Hawaii for what they call operational readiness inspection. They get a bunch of experts, and they come out and they check out the ship for everything from damage control, firefighting, the pilots take off and landing, bombing. They had a little island over there full of goats that they bombed. PETA people finally got them to stop doing that, but 30 years they never heard of goat, but they were worried about them.
Huh.
Well, anyway, that's we were getting ready for off. We were off Hawaii, and I remember it was December or January 14th, 1969, and we're getting ready for a GQ. At that time, I was working in what they called Platen Lens, pilot landing aid television. We videotaped all the takeoffs and landings, and Fresnel lens, which is the optical landing system that shoots the ball out into space, and is controlled by the ship's pitch and roll, and keeps it steady. And that's what the pilots come in and follow that down for the correct glide slope. So when they call the ball and they go Roger ball, in
Oh,
there.
really? Huh. I
Well,
didn't know they did that.
but I was manning the console for the Pilot 98 television. We got two cameras, one in the center line of the deck, like a little periscope assembly that watches them come in landing, and it's got two crosshairs. And the idea is if they're following the ball down, they're going to be in that crosshair. And many people can watch it. The guys at the back of the ship that's talking to the plane, that kind of stuff. And then, but the console, the other camera is up in the island. Well, it just so happened that that camera was on the Fritz, and the guy I worked with was up there trying to work on it, and I was fiddling with the controls whenever he asked me to. And was waiting for general quarters to down when all of a sudden I heard my buddy up there holler out, "Oh crap." And that time I felt this explosion, and I looked up in my camera, my centerline camera, and all I could see was this huge ball of flames. And so I thought, somebody might want to see this, so I hit the record button on it, and we recorded it. And
where was this ball of flame? Where your buddy was? His
no,
position?
no,
Oh.
it was on the aft end of the ship, but all the planes were there ready to be launched. They're all fully loaded with fuel and bombs and missiles. And a starter cart had been parked wrong, starting up a jet, and it blew hot exhaust on a Zuni rocket. And the Zuni rocket exploded, took off the fuel tanks, fuel spread across, other rockets went off, bombs started going off, and I could see people being blown up, laying on the deck on fire and stuff. So other guys that worked in the plant lands, they came running in because we were at GQ and that was our station. And I looked at them, I says, "Does this happen often?" You go, "No."
No. Wow.
So
How many casualties?
had 29 casualties and over 300 injuries.
Wow. Wow. Lesson learned
Yes.
that day, huh?
Yep.
Wow. How was the ship able to recover after that? What, did it take some time? I'd imagine?
Actually, they considered it like a miracle. We pulled back into Pearl Harbor, and they already had people on the pier assessing the damage and stuff. And within about 2.5 months, we were back on our way to there. The flight decks actually had these gaping holes where 500-pound bombs had just cut right through them and stuff, and took out one of our elevators, which never did get repaired for that trip. But they cut holes through the decks and they welded it, fixed the fire systems. There'd been some problems there. We'd lose pressure in the hoses and stuff, and it was just because of all the good trainings and stuff that people had, they were able to route water mains and that kind of stuff, and finally get the fire out.
Wow.
We had a reunion in Hawaii 35 years afterwards, and the engineering officer, who was a retired rear admiral, talked about it, and he says, "Well," he says, "it's time to let the cat out of the bag." He says, "We were within minutes of losing the whole ship because the fire had got down in, was within one bulkhead of the ship's magazines."
Oh.
And he says, but there was a group in there that got it cooled down and put out.
Wow.
But
Wow.
like I said, 2.5 months later, we were back on our way to Vietnam, and spent I think about 8 months over there.
Okay. And so after that, you came home for a while, then went on your second tour, or what happened after that end of that first tour? Did you go back to the stateside for a while?
Yeah, we came back. Actually, we came back to the States, offloaded all the planes and stuff, and then it was due for overhaul. The Enterprise due for overhaul with new reactors, And to do that, you had to go back to where they were built, Newport News, Virginia. So we had to go all the way around the Horn.
Oh, wow.
Because angle deck carrier can't get through the Panama Canal.
Wow, so all the way around South America.
All the way around South America, which was nice because we got to stop in Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, nice.
Outstanding place. Outstanding place. And then, but I did think it was kind of cute. We purged out cooling water, which is a little radioactive, and I happened to spot on the compass and the map where we were at. When we flushed that out, we weren't too far off of Cuba.
Wow.
And then one night, right before we pulled into port, I got a phone call. And I was supposed to make a phone call, and I got up to Radio Shack, and we called, and it said Navy Hospital. Well, my wife was about ready to have a baby.
Oh.
And I said, but how she got to a Navy hospital? No, she was staying with her folks down by Albert Lea. Well, the hospital down in Albert Lea is called Navy Hospital, so.
Oh.
So.
Wow.
So she let me know I had a little boy in there.
How was that dealing, having a wife at home with the child? How was that coping with that? Were you able to communicate much?
Not much.
No.
Letters. Today they have emails and that kind of stuff, and you can Skype stuff.
Yep.
We did. The only time I talked with my wife on phone was from the Philippines, which kind of our home base over there was our home base when we were out off of Vietnam. We'd pull in there for a little R&R and stuff. I sat in line for 45 minutes for a 3-minute phone call, which I found out later, because it was found out later from my father-in-law that, that only cost $45.
Oh, wow.
I said, okay, we don't do no more phone calling. So, mail most of the time.
Oh, wow. Second tour. Tell us about the second tour when you returned to Vietnam. What stands out in your memory from that time? Were you doing the same job too? I should ask that. What were you doing there?
Well, basically, we were off of what they called Yankee Station and stuff, and we were just supporting the troops and stuff. The first cruise, we were about ready to head back to the Philippines when all of a sudden, noticeable change in the speed and direction of the carrier, and I went up on deck, and we had like 3 carriers over there. I went up on the flight deck, and my office plant lens is right below there. So went up there and I looked around, and all I could see was the ships everywhere. 3 carriers, all kinds of destroyers and cruisers, and we were heading north. And it was a year after the Pueblo, and that was still going, or that had been there, but it was a year after the Pueblo. I wasn't on the ship then.
And what's the Pueblo for?
Pueblo was the Navy ship that the North Koreans captured, said it was spying on them.
Oh, okay.
But it was in their territorial waters, and Navy claims it wasn't in their territorial waters, but it definitely was a spy ship. But okay, but this is a year later, and North Korea again had shot down a Navy plane, reconnaissance plane, and so they sent us up there as a show of force, and we sailed off the coast of North Korea there with this task force 77, I think it was, and
so you showed them some force.
In there, and they flew around it, and we were out to sea for 60 days that time, which is a long time.
Wow.
Yeah. And the second cruise.
Was there any conflict in that time, those 60 days?
You know what? No.
Okay.
No, I don't know what happened. They gave up the cruise and stuff. And then the second cruise, like I said, most of the time, we just air support for the troops and stuff, bombing bridges and whatnot. And there, but then the second cruise, it was a Thanksgiving. I remember that we were going to be out to sea for Thanksgiving, but then we were going to go to Australia for some R&R, and we'd heard some wonderful things about Australia.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right before Christmas, we were about ready to take off. The Indian-Pakistan War broke out, and that would have been in 1971.
Okay.
They sent us and a few of our other ships over into the Indian Ocean to stand by to rescue American citizens. And so we did there, and we just sailed around. Had some couple of Russian ships, trawlers there. They'd come up alongside of us. It was kind of funny because the trawler would try to cross our bow, and our captain would just speed up.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. They were playing a little tag. But they were kind of nice. They'd pull up alongside of us. You know, they're sailors too. So we're taking pictures of them, and they're taking pictures of us. And, you know, yeah, in
Okay.
there. So we spent Christmas and New Year's out there, and then got the trip to Australia canceled. Though we did stop in Singapore on the way back, which Singapore is a beautiful, beautiful country too.
So you got to see quite a bit of the world, didn't you?
Oh yeah, Singapore, Philippines. Went to visit my brother who was in the Air Force up in Taiwan, Rio de Janeiro, in there, and then nothing in Europe until after I retired. I put my son in the Navy, and he was stationed over. I visited him and his family over in Italy and London.
What and where did you end up going throughout the rest of your military career after the second tour in Vietnam? Where did you end up stationed?
Yeah, after I came back, which is actually I had my 4 years in, got out. I liked the Navy, but I had a wife and 2 kids at home, and I was looking at 4 more years of sea duty before I could look at any shore duty. So I got out. Came back to Minnesota, started looking for a job. That was in '72. Not much jobs around to be had. You know, I thought, yeah, I'm an electrician, so I'll be an electrician. So I went to the electricians union, and they said, well, you can't be an electrician until you've been an apprentice. And I says, okay, I'll start as an apprentice. Well, you can't be an apprentice until you go to 2 years of schooling.
That schooling stuff.
Yeah. I says, well, can I test out of it? I said, other than zoning inspections, I can tell you pretty much all you want to know about electricity. Nope. Yeah. So, look, luckily went down to see my folks, and my dad was ex-farmer, but he was a bartender at a steakhouse down there. And we went down there, and he says, hey, I want you to meet someone. He says, he's the referee for the football game tonight, but he says he's in the Navy. So I got talking to the guy and found out he was a recruiter for the reserves, and he got talking to me about it, that he recalls the active duty, stays at the same place, and can quit or get fired at any time. I said, wow, that sounds pretty good. I says, you have any openings there? Well, he says, not in Sioux Falls, but he says, they've been looking for one up in Minneapolis. So I went up there, I interviewed, got the job, recalled active duty at the Navy and Marine Corps Reserve Center up here in Fort Snelling, and started recruiting there. About 3 years later, they started this called a readiness command. It was going to be a brand new thing, and they were going to command that was going to be in control of all the reserve centers in the Midwest out here.
Okay.
In this area. And they come up, and the recruiting officer, that was my boss, was going to be the recruiting officer and manpower officer. And he says, I need a chief recruiter. Now, there was many recruiters out there, Des Moines and Sioux Falls and other places, guys that were way senior to me and were better recruiters. But he says, I've got to take one of you 3 out of the Twin Cities area. Well, we had a chief there. That's an E7. And I was an E6, and there was another E6. Well, the chief was just a heck of a good guy. He's my sea daddy. But he's a great recruiter, but he couldn't handle paperwork. And being a staff job, you can imagine the paperwork you're going to go through. The other E6 was great with paperwork, but he didn't have a very good attitude, and the other recruiters would have killed him in a heartbeat. So I got selected as an E6, first class petty officer, into a E9 position.
Wow, that's quite a jump.
Yeah,
It's a huge jump.
yeah. Well, I wasn't promoted. It was just a position.
Just the position. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I become the chief recruiter in Fargo, Sioux Falls, Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, all the way out to Green Bay,
Wow.
Sheboygan, Duluth,
It's quite a bit of
La Crosse.
territory.
Yeah. And but obviously, and we did great. We had a great bunch of guys and stuff, and so we looked good every year. And so I got promoted. You know, every time it came up, it was usually about every 3 years. So promotions were automatic until it got up to Master Chief, and that did take me a couple extra years to make that.
Nice. Well, as we wrap things up here, one final question I'd like to ask you is what is your biggest takeaway from your experience in the military? What do you think, what do you learn about yourself and or about life?
Oh, getting along with people, taking care of your buddy, they take care of you. That'll never go away. You've got your idiot officers and idiot enlisted out there, but if you can get around them, there's twice as many good ones out there.
Great. Well, I think we got a good one right here. Thank you very much for coming and sharing your story. And thank you for your service as well, over 20 years in the Navy. Again, with Mr. Steve Meyer, Vietnam veteran who served in the Navy over 20 years. And I'm Tom Wright with your latest In Uniform. We'll see you next time.